Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Lokesh. I'll try to act as a kind of a facilitator for a discussion on the reason and the faith, the dichotomy between the two, and let's see where it takes us. I think we'll have a very open discussion, hopefully, which means that cameras off and mics off is probably not going to work. Yeah. So I'll encourage people to, be active. And if it is some special circumstances you can't be active, then it's fine, of course. But we will not be able to do this session just by being a passive listener. Yeah. I assume all of us have a little bit, at least a little bit of background in meditation or in general Buddhist ways of thinking about things. But if that's a wrong assumption, please just stop me and ask me any questions that I kind of, if I skip something that you and I don't know that you have not understood it yet. Yeah. So I think we'll begin by a small prayer. We'll say it 3 times. And if you could switch on your mics and recite it with me, that will be great. Or you can do it in your, in your hearts and minds. That's fine too. I'll screen share that prayer. Most of you must be familiar with that. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By my accumulations of the practice of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Because it is an interactive session, let's see how many of us are here. Oh, there's quite a bit. That's great. Um, any one of us who would like to share your views about the topic today? We are basically saying we need to kind of understand what the faith and the reason, what do these two things mean, and whether there is really a kind of a dichotomy or contradiction between the two. And if not, how do we synthesize these two together so that we understand His Holiness's and I think Buddha's intent of approaching our faith through reasoning, right? So for that, I think first we need to understand these terms very well. And I guess understanding these is not really a kind of a dictionary understanding that doesn't help us in our practice much. We just need to kind of see what it means to us in our day-to-day life. What are the kind of words or ideas that these things denote, and because these are heavily loaded words and different contexts have very different kind of color, they give a very different hue to all these things, these kind of words. So it's be good if we could kind of think and see what these things mean to us. Yeah. Before that, I think because there is nobody offline here and online it is kind of difficult, I would have liked to do kind of an introduction of all of us together so that we could engage in a discussion. But I think online format it's a little tough. And I'll just then introduce myself a little and then we can dive into it. My name is Lokesh Jindal. I've been a student of philosophy for some time now. I started kind of reading about 15, 20 years ago, but never formally kind of studied. Until in 2015, I joined a Nalanda Master's course with the Venerable Geshe Dorji Damdul at the Tibet House. And through his kindness and great intellect, uh, I can safely say that I do have a solid grounding into some of the basic concepts of Buddhist philosophy. And of late, I have also kind of exposing myself to Western philosophy so that I develop a kind of all-rounded view about the philosophical landscapes and what are the issues that we deal with. My interests are not in so much of religious aspects, but mainly of the metaphysical and the philosophical aspects of things. And that's how I approach it. I've been also studying logic and debate for 3, 4 years with the great teacher called Atisha Mathur. He teaches through the platform of ILTK in Italy, which is again, I think, the same kind of center like Tushita Center here, right? So it's been great learning, and I hope to share some of it with you. Uh, but the reason means that we talk to each other. I think, of course, you can reason solo within your mind, and many people do that. But if you look at a Tibetan or older Indian tradition too, a lot of debate was in the courtyard, two people talking to each other in defined format, right? And that's where the real learning, I think, is supposed to happen, that we learn from each other. And although this is just an introductory talk about, how the faith and reason kind of work with each other to reinforce each other, to validate each other. In mid to long term, I think we should develop a kind of a confidence and vocabulary, I guess, to interact in a logical sense about what we feel, about what our faiths are, and why some faiths are valid and some are not valid, maybe, right? Um, Before we do these kind of things, I think a little bit of um, meditation is good. Um, and I just had a little idea in mind, if you would help me with that. Um, we will not do any of the typical, single pointed or emptiness kind of meditation. We'll just think about some kind of our past incidents and see or recall where we have been kind to others. I'm not saying where others have been kind to you, but where we have been kind to others. I think that should be easier than recalling how others have been kind to us, right? So, because our ego, I guess, makes us kind of proud or makes us remember, oh, I did that great job or this great job kind of thing. So it's easier, I guess. So we'll just recall within our minds an incident where we have been kind to others. And I'll encourage any participant who would like to speak about that experience. And when you recall that, I'd also kind of want you to recall what you felt at that time, right? Um, and that feeling, was it the quality or the depth of that feeling, if you recall it? And what do you feel about that now when you think about it, right? Right. So, is there somebody who'd like to share? Just quick, 1 minute or 30 seconds or whatever. Anybody here? Anybody? Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure.
Once I was very high in the mountains
Mm-hmm.
for a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a big group of pilgrims who had just arrived after walking for many days.
Mm-hmm.
And back then I was contemplating on compassion, so I thought, okay, they're all arriving very tired. I must help them. So I, I help them, like carry their luggage and things like that, going up and down. It's not that easy in that altitude, especially after walking for so many days. So yeah,
Of course,
it
yeah.
felt very good. It felt very heart-opening to be helping others.
Were you like all smiling? Was it like, oh, my day is made now because I've helped so many people kind of thing?
Um, not that far.
Not that far, I guess. Okay. But what do you feel about it now? I mean, are you feeling proud of it, or are you feeling you would like to do it again? Or
Yeah, now I think it's just a normal thing to do, and there's nothing special about it.
oh, but it became normal. That's good, right? Because it kind of
It became normal, but like intellectually, I think has to be normal. You cannot just be sitting there and watching people carry their heavy bags without helping them.
yeah, yeah. Good. It's very important that we kind of recall the feelings, or the to be conscious or mindful of the feelings that we experience when we are doing something good, because that feeling, and hopefully it is good, because His Holiness says that all of us have the seed of compassion in us, and so we are kind of we feel good, although we might not notice it at the time, but our hearts and minds do feel good. And if we are conscious of that feeling, that helps us reinforce it next time, because our bodies and minds are kind of chasing that happiness and that good feel, right? So next time it will help in forming that habit of helping others, right? So it's helpful to be conscious of the feeling when we are doing something good, right? I guess same thing works with when you're doing something bad, but it's very difficult to be mindful when you're doing bad things, right? Very difficult. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you, Nico. No, okay. I can share one. It's very odd. I don't know whether I should talk about it in public forums like this. Um, in a rainy season, when there are lots of bugs around, especially here in Delhi area, and many of these bugs, some of these end up in the toilet bowl, right? One or two, like those guys flapping their small wings, not able to come out of that stagnant water in that bowl, right? And I need to use the toilet, right? So what do? I can flush it, right? I mean, this is the most kind of terrible act. But again, I mean, we have never been taught to, dig up insects out of a toilet bowl, right? It's very, very odd. So one fine day I did that. I mean, I just couldn't just flush a living insect into a pot. And I took a kind of a toilet paper and just tick, 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 and then I took it out and put it somewhere. I don't know whether it survived, or I don't know, because it was wet and couldn't fly anyway. But at least I guess I didn't have to live with the guilt of intentionally having kind of murdered a bug there. I don't know. Maybe I was trying to just save myself from the feeling of that guilt, right? It's one thing that unintentionally you step on an ant or something walking the road, but it's very hard to kind of, when you know that you're doing that and still do it, it's kind of hard, right? So I feel that I was trying to save myself from that guilt at the time. But now I also feel that maybe that saving myself from guilt is not that bad, because it also helped that bug, I guess, to live for a few more hours, I hope. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else would like to share? No. So why I did that is basically when you engage in group discussion, if we know that, if we recall that we have helped people in the past, it brings that kind of mental climate to the fore, and we are then able to engage in a positive energy, engage with a positive energy with other people in that discussion, with the right intent, with the right kind of mindset. Um, Yeah, so I noticed the question, but I think if we get into these questions, we'll kind of digress from the point. We'll get to that, I guess, if we continue these sessions. Okay. So with that, yes.
I had read somewhere
Hmm.
when nature is taking its own course of action, we should not interfere in between, like it was mentioned somewhere. So since you have mentioned about the bug, I have done it so many times as well, right?
So I'm not
And
alone in being that odd man. Yeah. Okay, good, good.
and then reading about it was like, oh, so I shouldn't have really done it because the insect was going through its own journey, and I sort of, you know, maybe increase the timeline for the lesson to be learned for that insect, or the ascension journey, or whatever we call it.
Well, I think it's a very important question, so let's just address it here. And it brings a larger question whether doing good to others is really that meaningful, because everybody is living through their own karma, right? And you'll say that because they're living through their own karma, why do we interrupt, right? So if there's a beggar who's hungry, he's kind of living through his probably something bad things that he did in the past, and it will not be right for us to interfere there. I don't think that's valid at all, right? It's also his karma that we are there to be able to offer him help if we have that mental attitude, right? It's also his karma that that beggar has encountered you who could potentially help if you had that thing, right? So I don't think it's logical to say that we should not help in somebody who's experiencing his own karma. There are people who hold this view. I think there's a more nuanced thing that we have to think about in these things. There are probably situations, and I'm not aware of those, and I'm not qualified to comment on them, where this might actually be right, where we should not be interfering in somebody else's karma or going through things. But in general, if we are stopping being good to others, or stopping generosity, or stopping helping somebody who's about to die to not die, I don't think that's valid. I mean, we should be doing all that. Yeah. We should be doing. It's not a valid thought.
Can I say something here?
Sure, sure.
Okay. I think it's a very wide topic. I think very not complicated, but there are so many different elements in this one. But I think main thing is what's your intention behind it. You're doing something good for anyone. What's the intention behind it? Is it want to do something good for yourself, or is it you want you to be good for other person, or for the other entity?
Right.
So that's and if you put this karma on one side, and okay, whatever the karma is, whether it's a beggar came to you for some help or whatever, yeah, maybe that's the case. But what's your intention behind that, giving that help or the money or whatever in certain form? That's more important than the what you want to do for the person.
Sure, sure. Right. I think the intent point that you bring is very, very, very important, and thank you for bringing that in. Of course, a lot of our personal development is developing that right intent, right? Even in the just the small meditation that we did, we can think of it in terms of encouraging ourselves to have that right intent, right? That's also a training. To develop a right intent itself is a part of kind of a Buddhist training, actually, right? So that's a very valid point. But in circumstances which are clearly in benefit of others, saving somebody from dying, right? There, of course, the intent is very important, but I think in a practical level, to not do that, it sounds kind of a, out of the world, you misinterpretation of a dharmic kind of a concept, right? So that's what I'm trying to bring to fore here when to Vichitra's
Yeah, this
question.
is very important. And the thing is that if you have sort of selfless intention, that works, right?
Right.
If you want to go out of your way, your way to actually help somebody, and in order to make other person's life a little easier,
Right.
that's perfect. But if you're going to help or want to help somebody so that your own karma will be in a better place, that's the intention. Is it for yourself? Is it a selfless act?
Yeah. True.
I believe it's the basis of human nature to help, and we don't help to like, oh, I'm gonna help and I'm gonna get this. We just help to help, like, okay, this person needs it and we'll just help. So there's no like thought pattern behind the help. That's what the humans are made out of, the pure essence. That's what I believe.
Yeah,
Which
sorry.
brings us to the topic of today, belief or faith versus reason, right? What Vichitra just told us is that a very strong statement of belief, right? And we could see, sorry, Jitendra, I think I cut you in between, but if you want to say something, we'll get to that, yeah? And because we are kind of digressing, so I wanted to bring it back to the central theme for today, is to kind of understand from each other, because there are no right and wrong answers in these things, right? Just to get under the skin of these words. What does a faith mean? What does a belief mean? And what does reason or logic or rationality or all these words mean to us? And are they as contradictory as they seem to be in our experience? Should I say that reason is all about science and belief is all about religion or spirituality or some tradition like that? Do we say that belief is so strong or so valid by itself that it doesn't need the support of a reason? And do you say reason can sustain itself without an underlying layer of some sort of axiomatic system, we could say, or some sort of belief system under it, right? Right. So these are the kind of themes that we should explore so that we see, hopefully, that these two things are not kind of contradictory. In fact, they're complementary to our practice of being good human beings, right? Of being compassionate people while also being intelligent, while also being able to understand the metaphysics or the reality around us, right? In the kind of a spiritual sense that we're talking about here. And for that, I'd probably invite you to kind of, if you, some of us who are active, what do you think? What is a belief to you? I mean, you don't have to be technical about it. You don't have to think too much. Just like, oh, I believe, we should eat good food. That's good enough. I believe that being good, like you just said, this is very nice, right? That it is the human nature to be good. And what do you mean by faith? Is it just, some religious faith only? Because many people equate faith with religious faith, which is fine. But is it something you have faith in your teacher? When you were a second grader, you believed when your teacher told you that 2 + 2 is 4, right? Things like that. So are these words only religious, or how do they relate to us in a day-to-day life? It's something that that I want to discuss here. Anyone wants to give a stab at it?
Well, through my experiences, what I have observed is that the overall personality of a person, which whatever his experiences, the state of being, past experiences, which people generally call traumas and lessons, basically. All of this combined together create this sort of faith belief systems, and a person does their thoughts, words, and actions according to this entire, set pattern, like a programming, like how a computer is programmed, right? So
Yeah.
just like that, the brain is kind of like an instrument and it's programmed, and every time there is a thought, it just sends signals to the body. And that's what the metaphysical aspect of this that I have observed in my meditation is, anytime there is a thought, there is a sensation, and the sensation then makes me either go for a reaction or brings me back to stillness. So
Mm.
the entire metaphysical world is made in such a way that it is intertwined with our belief system and the faith and everything. So you cannot separate these things from each other. These are so deeply intertwined.
Mm. So you'd say that a belief is basically kind of a collection of experiences that somebody has gone through and which derive their day-to-day thoughts and actions. Is that a good summary of what you just said?
Well, I'll say it's a sanskara. Everything is a
Yeah,
sanskara.
right. Yeah.
Yes.
And what about reason? What do you think is reason?
The reason is also, again, the cause of action and the collection of sankhara. If your sankhara of doing a certain thing is, so huge, basically, in the metaphysical world, you have gathered so many layers of those sankharas, then you tend to act on it more than, you know.
Mm, mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So am I audible?
Hi, Sahil. Yeah, you are.
So I think the way I think about this is that maybe beliefs are based upon felt body experiences and how we interpret the world. And I think, as Vichitra was saying, some of it comes from sanskara, some of it comes from trauma and whatever, and a lot of other things. And I think reason, as kind of functions upon these beliefs. So you said axiomatic systems a couple of minutes ago. So I think these beliefs are then kind of an axioms on which reason operates. And reason, I think, is important because reason helps us give value hierarchy, a judgment to different beliefs. And reason also helps us in consistency. That if I value some belief, then what are the logical consequences of that? So if I value belief, I don't know, belief A, for example, and let's say my actions are D, but reason says me that if I believe in A, then my actions should be B, then it tells me that I need to change myself from D to B.
Yeah.
So in that sense, reason helps us give a compass to navigate a bit, but that reason by itself is helpless. Like, reason needs belief to work upon.
Yeah. You bring a very important point here. Reason by itself is helpless, right? That's a uh, that's something that philosophers have wondered for a long time, actually. Um, the ultimately, our actions are kind of mostly, until you have a very high level kind of meditator or a bodhisattva, our actions are driven by uh, kind of drive for happiness and avoiding suffering, right? Which are kind of emotional states, right? And and many people, even in Western philosophy, would think that reason, although valuable, is kind of passive. It doesn't have power to drive you into an action. right? Whereas our emotions or beliefs have that power for us to get into an action. So reason, while it is a tool for a better cognitive function, the actions that we do with our speech and body, mental actions are mainly driven by a desire, which is kind of emotive state, which has some basis in a kind of a belief system, and that desire then helps us in moving toward that. So you would say, a very simple example, you would say that I am eating because I'm hungry. Now, it's a perfectly reasonable statement, right? But the underlying premises of it, that I'm hungry, is a feeling.
I feel hungry.
And the action that it is linked to is eating. But that linking happens through reason, right? Right. In that sense, I think let's look at something that Buddha said. Let me share a screen. I think you've probably heard of it many times. Next page. Yeah. Have you heard of this? O bhikshus and wise men, just as a goldsmith would test his gold by burning, cutting, and rubbing it, so you must examine my words and accept them by not merely out of reverence for me. This is from an important sutra of Tensere, right? So I'll tell you my story with this sutra or this quote. So I am from science background, right? Engineering background. And I have this deep respect for Western empirical developments in science and technology, where a good scientist would, let's say, discover a new law or a new kind of way of doing things. And to validate it, he or she would invite comments and criticism from everybody around in the community and see whether it stands that validation, right? And I would think that Buddha is being a great person and has discovered these fundamental laws, how things are, right? He was inviting others to challenge it and then hence solidify it, hence prove that he is valid, right? And so, yeah, very nice, right? After a few years, then I thought maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've not really understood. Where do you think I could have been wrong in this? And in fact, it happened, right? I mean, through the logical or the different traditions learned from each other in Indian philosophical landscape. There are kind of 5 to 6 schools of philosophy, including something which are collectively now called Hindus, and then there was Jainas, and there were other schools, right, which learned from each other, which built upon each other's kind of learnings, while maintaining very distinct kind of outlook toward what is God, or what is the nature of things, and what is the nature of mind, etc., right? So it did go through like that. So Buddha's words were examined for their validity, right? So I was thinking, yeah, that's how it is. But there's more to it. Later, when I understood a little bit more about how Buddha was operating, I thought there is something missing in this interpretation. What could that be?
What about examine? Rather than examine, it should be experience.
Examine is fine. I think is saying you have to reason it, just not take it as a kind of, because I said it, believe it kind of. It's not prescriptive in that sense.
Yeah, but if the mind does not have the experience, then the mind will revolt, right? That's why you can question, because it's not in your experiential reality. That's
True. Anybody else?
I think it would, like, one would need to have a specific state of mind to do this properly. For example, if I have taken a lot of alcohol and I do this exercise, the result would be horrendous. I would disagree with the Buddha in that intoxicated state.
Right.
So I think the background or the whatever axioms or background or unconscious or whatever, it has to be a very specific kind of background.
Yeah.
Should we call it purification, inner purification, and outer purification?
I don't know what purification means. I mean, in general, I have heard about it. It's much more simpler than that. I think I misunderstood the intent that Buddha wanted to kind of prove himself as a scientist. He was trying to say that you will not get the full benefit of his words until they are examined logically.
Yeah. Is it possible that with any investigation, anything you investigate or try to prove or the validation of something, it has to be from the scientific point of view. It has to be evidence-based research in a way.
Itana, we are not able to hear you clearly. Can you come a little bit closer to
Yeah.
the mic? Are you people able to hear?
Yeah.
No, right? It's
No.
quite less, right?
Okay. So I'm saying, can you hear me all right? Can you hear me good?
It is
No?
still low, but if you speak slowly, maybe we can.
Just trying to figure out. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to say that is it possible that when we investigate or do some research, anything, it has to be from a scientific point of view, where evidence based. So what the evidence you have gathered to prove that point from scientific point of view to support that what you want to investigate or your hypothesis, your what you're trying to say that this is what it is. Yeah. And if you have and the validations of your experience or methodology also count. But the model or the methodology that you are using is that the support that kind of investigation. Right? If there's any flaws there, then you won't get the correct or right results. Right? So there are different elements to how you investigate or how you research that thing. Right. And from Buddhist point of view, all this theory, all this whatever the findings were, they were based on the experience. And this experience was like the personal and the validated by the at that time how people experience those things and what results they got at that time.
Right. But let me temper that thought by kind of adding a few words or concepts here, because this is a faith versus reason. And examine here means to me reason, and merely out of reference for me means the faith for Buddha, right? So he's saying that do not just, or merely, so merely is the operative word here, right? Of course, reverence for Buddha is important, but only that probably is not sufficient, is he's trying to say, right? Or for faith in our teachers is important. Even when we are in small grades, right? We learned so many of the things, believing that teacher is correct or the book is correct. Even that was an authoritative figure, right? So although reverence for our teachers or our whoever gives us knowledge is important, merely that is not good. Why is that not good is probably, I think we can approach it by kind of two associated notions about what reason is and what faith is, right? For faith, there is a lot more subjectivity there. I don't know whether you would agree with me on that or not. I could say that Matrix movie is a good representation of the dreamlike nature of the world. Another person might say, no, that's just a commercial gimmick, and it's not, right? A difference in opinion it's not really faith, but a difference in opinion hardened is probably a difference in faith, like we see in the world today. So many fights and wars going on about that, right? So faith has this element of a subjectivity, sometimes which is hardened, sometimes it could be more flexible, but there is an unmistakable kind of subjectivity to it. Whereas you contrast it with reason, nobody in his sane mind will say that, okay, 1 + 3 is not 4, something. It has a kind of universality to it. It has a kind of universal acceptability or a stability toward it, right? Maybe what, in this sense, what it is trying to say is that if our practice, if our dharma, if our way of dealing with the world is based more on that stable grounding of reason rather than of me versus somebody else kind of opinionated kind of interpretation of it, maybe it will lend that stability and that value to our practice, right? That's one of the things where His Holiness also, when we want to stabilize our practice, when we want to say that we have conviction in the teachings of Buddha or teachings of His Holiness or all our esteemed teachers, it is probably that those teachings are probably much more stable. They will last with us longer. And hopefully to the next births, if you believe in rebirth, you don't have to, but if you believe in rebirth, then they will probably last as a part of our property or an imprint in our mind to be taken forward. Whereas something which is unstable, which is a view, one view against the other, has less likelihood to be that way, right? Therefore, it is important for us to have a faith which is based out of reason, because that would provide that foundational stability to it, right?
Yeah, faith is foundation. That's
sure, of course,
right.
of course.
Absolutely right, right? Because faith is the must to have to start with. But faith is also they're varied. There is a wide.
Very wide.
Right? It's very wide, right? Okay. And a certain culture, all different culture have different faith, different way of doing things, different way of thinking, right? According to their own what they practice, right? But you have to have a faith to be this is the foundation, like very basics of everything you do. Then you can develop your own knowledge by experiencing it, challenging it, validating it.
Right.
Yeah. But how do you do that? So you need a guideline. It's like if you study, I know you I don't know whether you're a PhD or the
not at all
content, right? And then you have to have some sort of model to guideline to follow those rules to validate your findings.
Sure.
Right. Sure. What you find on those things that has to be in this protocol, right? So Buddhist point of view, that gives you the guideline. If you read this through, that gives you the guideline. Within those framework, you can test. Right. You can test those things. That's your own findings.
Sure.
Or what you want to accept or reject, whatever it is.
Sure.
You want to reject it? Why you want to reject it? You need to have some sort of reason behind it. You want to accept it? Why you're accepting it? You have to have a reason behind it. And you have to prove it. You have to prove it. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm rejecting it." That's not all right. So you have to have something behind those things to prove. Okay, I'm rejecting because of this A, B, C, and D, or I'm accepting it because of A, B, C, and D. So there has to have some sort of validation. That within the framework, that framework has to be from that Buddhist point of view. right?
I'm not sure about the has to be Buddhist point of view, but I think Buddha was not a Buddhist, right?
No.
Let's get into that, right? It's a I guess if it stands to reason, a fair-minded spiritual person will probably accept it, right? Like you said in so many words, right? So I just feel so comfortable being in this Buddhist kind of thing because of the sutras like this, actually, because they ask me to be reasonable, rational, and not merely be based on a faith. This is not to say that faith is not important. Please don't misinterpret this thing. It is very critical at some point, in the same way that we believe our high school teacher to be saying things and examining us, and we kind of agree with him without doing a PhD in that subject about some of the things that are taught, right? In the same way, it is very important for us to have respect and faith in our teachers. And Buddha, after all, is one of the greatest teachers that humanity has ever seen in that sense. Yes, you wanted to say something?
So, and this is coming as a social scientist, I think, first I'll answer to what you said, what could be wrong, like here. So I think I see it like having a basic structure. Like, for example, when we say the Constitution, there is a basic structure, and then comes an interpretation. Like, you can interpret it, but there has to be a reference. There has to be something which cannot be moved, which cannot be defined. So, I mean, I always see everything with respect to a reference. And when you said about the subjectivity, of course. So, for example, human rights. It's a subjective thing that humans have right. It is not an objective truth. I don't have a right. But when we see the reference as a humanity, human rights become very, very important.
Right.
So for me, faith is something which is an outlook, how we define life. So I define faith as the root of the tree of hope. It could be a personal hope. It could be a societal hope. Or it could be as the entire globe that we talk about. So there are everything, human right, even atheism is a belief. Like, I don't believe in God, it's a belief.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's all subjective,
right.
Everything. And the last thing is, so everything, interpretation, context, language, all this have to be taken into account. So maybe when Buddha was referring to this, like you went very clearly the word clearly, let's go into the language. So that's all what we have to do. So reference is very, very important. And the basic structure, where the faith comes into play.
Right.
Over which we can interpret it and play with it.
Sure.
Not the basic structure.
Right. Yeah. True. So, like I was saying, I'm a student of Western philosophy too. Some of these topics come out in the recent philosophy. Recent, I mean, last 300, 400 years. And one of the questions is, as opposed to science, where later scientist can disprove or build upon the theory of the earlier scientist, and kind of that is accepted, right? That's a evolutionary arc is there within a scientific field, right? In philosophy, that arc is very difficult to demonstrate, right? If you say philosopher A said something and B said something opposite, there is no validation of which one is correct, because it again is kind of dealing in a subjective sphere, in a sphere of ultimately your truth against my truth kind of a thing, right? And that's where, to your point, that everybody kind of builds a faith system, and to, like one of the participants said, that it is basically culmination of all the experiences. And when we hear philosopher A versus B, which gels well with your kind of mental makeup, and you say, yeah, this is valid, this guy is valid, that guy is valid, right? And that's how the philosophy is built. There's no kind of objective way, like in the sciences you do, like in maths you do. There's no kind of really clear-cut objective way of judging A versus B, which is better. And that's where it's critical, and like all our great teachers say, we need to determine our starting point. Otherwise, we'll be lost with A versus B. What is it actually that you want? You want to end your suffering. You want to be happy. And you test those against that benchmark. What is it that's driving me toward that? And that I would check as my criteria for a valid philosophical system, right? If we don't have a starting point, then we are lost here and there. We are lost in kind of, oh, A said this, it feels right. Oh, B said that. Yeah, partly that is also okay. Then what do you do with it? Does it help you toward becoming a better human being, or becoming a happier being, or does it help you to benefit others? Things like those get kind of lost in there. It's the same question with ethics, right? So far, many of us in not us, as in I'm not a Western philosopher, many of us are not able to really give a solid reasoning behind why I should be good, right? So I study meta ethics at college, and I wonder, I mean, what is going on? Some would say that it is just, you should do this and just accept it on face value, kind of. You should not do that, accept it on face value. It's kind of prescriptive in that nature. Some would say, no, it's just words. Some would say, no, it is a part of human nature to be like that, and no more justification is required. No more reasoning is required, right? And there are various different views, and there is like, oh, it could be okay, this could be okay, that could be okay. Because if you look at all our, whatever we are learning, and the goal is not set clearly in the sense of what is it that we're trying to achieve from it, it becomes kind of anything goes. And that's why the great teachers like Buddha have set, they didn't even answer some of the questions we thought was not relevant, right? Which could probably be important, who was merely engaged in kind of intellectual exercises, but which were not in line with the goals. Just don't do that, right? So if our project in life is to be happy and avoid suffering, what is that goal? How does it translate into an ethical framework? Is what we have done paramitas, right? Or what we know, the Eightfold Path, right? So that translation, well articulated, then becomes a solid, rational way of looking at why I should be ethical. Why the second paramita of discipline is so important, right? Or why the Eightfold Path, much of it is which basically ethics is so important, right? Sorry, I think we digressed, but I think going back to the point, even ethics, if we take it as a kind of a subject of quote unquote faith area, and not as a reason area, like most people tend to take faith as in prescriptive faith, love thy neighbor, kind of a prescriptive way of looking at it. And then there is the rational side of things. What I'm trying to bring home here is that it's not that at least in Buddhist way of thinking, it is devoid of rationality. It is rational because, like some of us have said, our experience tells us that we want to avoid suffering and maximize happiness. From that experience, we get into a rational mode of thinking. What is it that will bring that about? And through the guidance of our teachers and our own rational capacity, we develop conviction into why I should be following the 6 paramitas or the 10 paramitas, or why the Eightfold Noble Path is the way it is, right? So there is a rational basis of ethics too, at least, and that gives a lot of comfort. That gives a lot of kind of direction to how we should conduct our life in that sense. Yeah.
When you say maximize happiness and reduce suffering itself, the statement itself for me is like, how is that, even possible? Because ultimately, then it's a game of desire, right? Then you're desiring more happiness and you're escaping the suffering which is inevitable.
Yeah.
Until you're an observer, there is like the ultimate balance. Until then, though, you have to go like a sine wave up and down. No,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that equilibrium, until that equilibrium comes, then that accepting, rejecting, craving, aversion, all, like just like you said earlier, like a few minutes ago, that nothing is right and nothing is wrong, nothing is good and nothing is bad, we can just be open about it. Then I believe what we are discussing is very brain oriented, it's very intellectual. And where all the answers reside is the silence, is the stillness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are kind of many ways of answering this, because you, I think, touched upon 3, 4 very important points. When you're talking about chasing happiness and reducing suffering, um, well, that's a fact of life, right? I mean, I do want to avoid pain. That's an experience. I didn't want a vaccination for COVID. Of course, the needle pains, right? I mean, that's as simple as that, right? So it's a lived experience that we avoided. And you're also right that it's just like a wave, it comes and goes. But the teachers like Buddha would then want to say that why is that a wave? Why is that? Why it can't be stopped? That's what his project was, right? He wanted to end it, right? And then we get into his philosophy and how he taught us how to avoid it, right? So that's the kind of first part of your thing. I don't think I agree with you that there is nothing good, nothing bad like that, right? Of course, there are activities which are good, mental, verbal, and physical, and activities which are bad or undesirable. Good and bad are very strong words. Some of which, some activities will help you become happier and avoid pain, others won't. So from that yardstick, some are more desirable activities and some are not, right? In a more fundamental or like in Buddha's teaching, at least in Mahayana scheme of things, the lack of objective existence and everything being subjective. If you measure by that yardstick, when we say that nothing has objective existence, in that sense, you could say that nothing is objectively good, nothing is objectively bad, and things like that. But in our lived experience, we don't say that, right? Because then it just invalidates all the ethics. It invalidates the path, right? So that's not something that we want to kind of encourage.
Can I speak?
Of course.
Yeah, so I think these kind of statements that nothing is good and bad. So personally, whenever I have seen people saying this, so they're using this to justify some of their desire.
Of course.
And
Me too. I do that all the time.
And personally, I think then the question comes to my mind that if nothing is good or bad, then why aren't you doing the opposite?
Exactly.
So if nothing is good or bad, then I would have been neutral towards things. I would not have a preference.
Yeah.
I think that's where what you were saying about objectivity in Mahayana comes. That if I am in that state, that I can be neutral. If I'm in that state emotionally, then I think I can say that okay, nothing is good or bad. But till the time I have emotional reactions, I feel things are good or bad. So I think reasons tells us that these two things are not consistent. That at one end I am saying that there is
Of
nothing
course it
good or
is
bad.
not. Of course it's not.
But the next second I am making judgments emotionally. So these two things are then inconsistent.
Yeah, but what I meant by saying good and bad was when there is something good, then we connected instantly with happiness, right? Or we connected instantly with, okay, I want this more since it is good. Or if something is bad, then I would not want it in my life. It creates a certain kind of, repulsion or an aversion in my life. So that creates suffering. So in those terms, when I meant like this is good and bad, not like
I see.
connected
Yeah.
to my own desires or whatever. It,
Okay, okay. So you meant that some things that you want to avoid, which you call as bad, something you want to kind of have, which you
yeah,
want
like
as
some
good. Yeah.
people will say, okay, I reject this reason or I accept this reason, right? Because as you said, yardstick, there are so many different yardsticks, and the parameters are so different according to each brain and according to the ascension journey of a person, right? According to the sankara that has been gathered from past lives. If someone has not done meditation in their past lives, they probably will not even get attracted towards it. So that's just what I was trying to um, share, and not in terms of yeah, good and bad, like someone is having something like I feel the values are so important in life. If you're not following all the five, you know, feel, then whatever you do out of it is going to cause self harm only.
Right, right.
think
Yeah.
I think we're confusing ourselves in some respect, the good and bad and the all the rest and thing. It's just I think the if you look on the but it is like a nine precepts, like values, and we have to follow that. Okay, we shouldn't do certain things that can create aversions. All right, it can make us say more sort of inflict suffering, and also the suffering or the happiness, they all can be a perceived one, right? How we perceive ourselves, how we perceive those things. So rather than the we just fixated on the okay, this is suffering and this is the happiness. So these things are very fluid. These things are very fluid. So you have to understand that. Okay, what is suffering for me? Not for you or anybody else. What's me in it? All right.
Yeah.
How can I reduce my suffering, or how can I increase my happiness? What do I need? Because the way I see the world, the way I see my own environment is very different to the way you see your environment. Your experience is very unique to you. My experience are very unique to me. The way we brought up, the surrounding ways we brought up, that make us what and who we are.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said the yardstick is so different for all of us.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
yeah, the
It also
truth
brings us
is
back to that same thing. It's so subjective. It's yardstick itself is a kind of a article of faith
exactly.
rather than a rational thing. So because we are trying to
Yeah.
discuss the distinction between, did you notice that as we discuss these things, we are moving, and that's very interesting for me to note, from things that we were saying belief based are now slowly we are arguing about it. We are trying to slowly being rational about it more. That's how discussions and debates are the tool that Buddha wanted us to kind of use to learn from each other in a more, for lack of a word, in a rational sense, right? Other people who do not have the right motivations might also discuss things and degenerate into a fight about my faith versus yours, my belief versus yours, my ideas versus yours, right? But in a forum like this, where the motivation is correct, the discussions of faith trying to, through a rational mechanism, kind of integrate into each other, right? You'll notice that Vichitra's views and Sahil's views and Jitendra's views are kind of now converging through discussion, right? And that's something, that's a skill that we need to develop in a course. And that's when all our views, when they become so multidimensional and rational, the stability emerges from it, right? That is what they do intentionally in monastic universities when they debate with each other. The monks, they spend probably 10 hours every day or something debating with each other, 7 days a week, 30 days a month, and for 20 years, right? That's what they're essentially doing, learning from each other. a rational basis of their kind of beliefs, rational basis of why Buddha is a valid being, basically, why his words are valid, or not just limited to Buddha, all our teachers, Nalanda masters, and not just limited to Buddhist faith. I mean, this is a Buddhist center, so we talk about Buddha, but there are many, many rational, nice teachings in all the faiths, right? So if we can kind of, have that open mind and rationally engage in that dialogue, we'll learn from each other. We'll, I think, be much, much better world to bring that about, right? So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
Buddha is always encouraged to and invite the debate, because that's where you can explore things and makes
Yeah.
more sense to people, and
Yeah.
that's the whole objective of those things.
Yeah, and the reason behind it is because it stabilizes.
Stabilize
It
those things so that
stabilizes
this create
ethics
new.
in us. It stabilizes a mental attitude in us.
Yeah.
It stabilizes our good faith into
Good faith, right?
wanting to become a better person, wanting to be out of samsara, wanting liberation, wanting Buddhahood, right? And that stabilizing is very important. Very, very, very
Stabilizes,
important.
yeah, and same thing stabilizes comes from the it is very a good ethical point of view, and
Yeah.
similarly with from the moral point of view as well, because these two are the main like pillar,
Of course.
right, where the all the faiths are standing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if these two shifted, the faith will just collapse.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because the moral and ethical value, you can read up Gita, you can read up Ramayana, you can read up any of those, the holy books. These two are the main pillar of all the religion, right?
True.
So you have to follow those things. Within those things, that you can have debate, you can do anything. But in Buddhism, there's an extra 9 precepts you can read up on those things. That okay, what the moral values are, what you should be follow. Right. So your suffering can be reduced, or you can eliminate those things. Right. So, but it's very, 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 very personal, rather than very universal. These things. So it's very so depends on the person to person, rather than categorically you can say this is what it is.
Yeah. True.
So that's my point of view anyway.
Any other
bring
comment?
back that statement, that slide.
You want me to screen share?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think when you were saying that in time you understood different meanings of this, so I think I was also relating it. I saw this from the other side when you were speaking, in the sense that I also saw that maybe Buddha is also saying that thing, that reason by itself is passive. That if you just follow my teachings without experiencing, then there would not be that activeness.
Yeah.
And I think when you said that monks do this for 20 years or so maybe that's the path in that sense. Like, just I was thinking that reason by itself is passive, so you have to experience for a long time so that desires or instincts change.
Right. So by passive, because you bring that up and I didn't elaborate, I'll just kind of try to explain what I mean by that, which might be kind of shed more light on it. Passive doesn't mean that it is in the sense of being useless, or in the sense of being of little utility in our day-to-day experiences. It forms that cognitive underlying layer, but it in itself doesn't derive us. In Buddhist things, we'll say that I'm not being technically very, very, so saying very vaguely, but in a Buddhist sense, we would say that if reason is the wisdom of emptiness, then the affective side or the action, emotion side is bodhicitta. Right? If we were saying, so wisdom of happiness is a kind of cognitive state, which can impact a lot and support and give a completely different dimension to how you interpret bodhicitta, or how you experience it, or how you behave being a bodhisattva, which is a more of an emotive state, right? So even in that sense, we are, by saying it is passive, let's not associate kind of a negative meaning to it, or a kind of value it lesser because it is passive. We are mainly saying it is passive because it is not deriving our actions more directly. Yeah. Sorry, so it was just a kind of side thing.
Thanks for bringing that distinction of reason, emptiness, and bodhicitta. Yeah,
that's just very approximate. Yeah, I mean,
but
it's
it
not,
makes
I think,
sense.
rigorous in a very logical sense, but that's how it is. I think my experience of learning is that these are kind of notions, right? One notion against the other. Some notions we find much closely related, like in a thesaurus, you'd find a lot of words grouped together which kind of talk about the same concept but different colors to it. They're not synonyms, right? They are just kind of group of words which are kind of in the same ballpark, for lack of better expression, right? In the same way, that's how learning happens, at least for me. I tend to look at different words. There's so many of them. And if you study philosophy, just everybody has a different invention of the words and concepts, right? And then you have to say that, oh, these guys are kind of clubbing together into this way. This is how it is, kind of. Otherwise, the mental structure breaks down and don't make sense of anything, right? So in that sense, for me, reason is in the same ballpark as emptiness. Whereas things like faith, things like emotion, things like ethics are in the ballpark of bodhicitta in very, very approximate sense, right? That's what I mean to say. All right, so I think we have about 15 minutes now. I would like to invite, if possible, some feedback about, well, we didn't do before and after kind of thing because we didn't do before. And I don't know what our views were about distinction, or whether faith and reason kind of seem contradictory, because that's what many of the people would say, there's science versus religion, because it degenerates into that kind of thing. But we are not talking about that here, right? We're talking about assimilation of these two as a part and parcel of our practice, of our mission to be better people, right? So in that sense, has this discussion helped to kind of bring those distinctions or that supporting network of these two to a little bit more clearer things? Or is there something that we could cover more, or anything, especially people who have participated or listened more, with more attention, or something that we should have dealt with more? There are many areas of it. For example, I said that reason is more kind of universal and stable, and faith is more kind of subjective. But there are many dimensions to these kind of. This is just one of the dimensions that we could look at to kind of, substantiate what you're trying to achieve here.
I think there is no end to the brain. The brain will keep generating and generating, and it's never going to end, right?
Right.
So the only thing we can understand is that it is very subjective and it's very intentful, whatever we do in our life. Like if we have the intention to improve our life, to be more still, then we have to take our journey through our own two legs.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Definitely the practical side would be very interesting to explore, like you also spoke of that, of course, there is a lot of, mental exercise that we can do, and we can, certainly we definitely derive a lot of value, or at least a lot of interest in that. It's very interesting to sort of put that in one's head. But to bring it back to like the lived experience of, what is actually being useful, and coming back to the point of, whether it's the larger purpose, or whether it's, trying to be ethical for a certain cause, or, whether somebody has, again, for the lack of a better word, has faith in concepts like enlightenment or Buddhahood, or, if that's a goal for, a Buddhist person, then, I mean, that aligning that to various different aspects of that goal, and how that goal can shift from person to person, and exploring the idea of reason versus faith. I think in that space would be very interesting to sort of just think about. I guess again, everything is mental to the first level, but once it sort of comes down to a very practical learning aspect, which I guess will only happen over time, and remembering the concepts more.
Yeah. True. In monastic setup, or nowadays we can also engage in non-monastic way, to build our faculty for reason is done in a systematic way. Of course, these discussions are very, very helpful, and we should engage with a lot of variety of people and open-mindedly think through that through a logical framework. But training in that logical framework itself is a task that we should kind of engage in, right? And it's not too difficult in terms of the concepts of what constitute a good logical or rational way of thinking. In terms of the concepts of it, it is harder to put into practice, to evaluate different views on that logical or rational yardstick, right? We engage in like even in this discussion, we engage in kind of even in day-to-day life a very rudimentary is not the right word, but in a simple kind of a rational behavior. We do things which are justified. For example, when we choose to go from point A to B, we want to see which is the best route and rationally think that, okay, that's longer, that's smaller, that is more, the roads are bad, these roads are good, and things like that, right? This is safer, not safer. We'll evaluate things rationally in that sense, right? So in more spiritual and philosophical sense, there is a formal study of logic that can be done. And if you're interested, we can start exploring that. Like I said, I learned it from a great teacher called Tisha Mathur. And Venerable Geshe Doji Damsul also teaches it, but not in that great sense, great of depth. But he does teaches in very comprehensive way in the Nalanda courses there in Tibet House. So we can engage more in that kind of thing if people are interested. But even these discussions about what really is that complementary nature of these things, the need to stabilize our belief systems in a rational framework, those kind of things themselves are very, very valuable. Yeah. I think we can then end the session today. A small dedication we could do. How would we do that?
Just sum it up. I think,
Yeah.
because, just it's not, I think we discussed two words, passive and active. So since I work on language a lot, so we cannot act if you're not active, because the word act is there in the active.
Yeah, very important. Yeah.
So we have to be active to act. We have to be passive to pass the test of samsara, let's say. So yeah.
I didn't notice that. Yeah, great. Great. Yeah. Well, does anybody want to offer a dedication for it? Do we have a prayer book or something where we could just read through or something? Oh, that's fine. I'll just bring it up. Okay. This one's here. So I'll read the dedication prayers of this center, which are very nice. And please try to recite them and internalize them and emotionally follow them if possible. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta, not yet arisen, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Tenjin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the land of snow, teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion, to the lotus holder, Tenjin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantha Bandra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victors of the three times in order to have good conduct. For the Dharma King Tsongapa's way of Dharma to flourish, may all signs of obstacles be pacified and all conductive conditions be complete. Due to the two types of merits of the three times of myself and others, may the teachings of the victorious ones, Losang Drakpa, shine resplendent forever. Thank you very much. Thank you.